We are back in the shop, and today I want to pick up where we left off on the Land Cruiser, get the rest of that front axle torn down, start on the thirds, and I have some work I have to do on this KTM as well. So we tore apart everything in the last episode. As you can see, we have a parts mess everywhere. I have these third members. That's the front third, that's the rear third. I want to get these things totally stripped down and ready for when I buy the gears and lockers. And then as far as the KTM goes, have a trip coming up, and I just want to check a couple things, flush the coolant out, and yeah, just get it ready. Let's get to it. If you've been following the channel for a while, you know that when I had the shop built, I've been trying to figure out what to do in this area here where the ladder is. And I had a couple of suggestions to make it a paint booth, which I thought was a really good idea. And we can still use the other 2/3 of that bay for that. But I think that front 12x12 area, what I want to do is turn that into like the moto shop area. The more and more I'm exposed to the trails and stuff out here, the more I see how many single track and just dirt bike able trails there are, and not to mention we can actually ride two strokes out here as compared to where I moved from. So I'm starting to get more and more passionate about it and starting to get more and more back into the sport, and I just want to have an area to work on the bike. So I think that's what I'm going to do with that area back there. All right, I think I'm going to start with the front differential just because it's an 8-inch Toyota Diff. It's more familiar to me. I know I need to build a diff holder, but for right now this will do. I think when we get these things back together, I'm definitely going to want to build a diff holder. So I think I'm actually going to build a differential holder right now because I kind of don't want to just work on that on a table, flopping around sideways. It's going to be easier if it's mounted to something. So I think I can use this ruler or whatever this is on the side of this table saw and probably repurpose this steel to build a differential holder. So that's what I'm going to do, and we're going to see if it works.
This is going to be a very basic design. I just took some quick measurements to get a general idea of what I want to build, make a couple right angles with this angle iron here, and it's very simple. I've made something like this in the past that bolted to an engine stand. It's a lot more flimsy and thinner material, but for the price of these things, like the cheapest one I could find on Amazon, and it might not even work, was $90. So I figured why not just use scrap steel to make something that's probably going to be better.
All right, well, here is the table saw differential holder made out of scrap parts. This thing's really heavy duty, it's really heavy. The actual angle iron here is like 3/16, and these little support braces are like 3/8. So I think it should support the differential no problem. Let me show you what the idea is and how this will mount to the table saw. So there are holes on the front of this table, and guys, I'm not using this as a table saw, I'm using it as a fab table. And then this is gonna mount, there we have slotted on this side for adjustability, but really it's because I messed up the holes. And then there's a middle mounting hole, and then there's a far mounting hole. So it's actually gonna mount to the bench itself. I need to make little ears that are gonna go on the inside that go to the differential, but let's see if this thing fits up. Surprisingly, this worked exactly as planned. Things don't usually go that way over here, but I reused these spacers that were behind the rail as well. So those are like 1/2-inch spacers, and I used it on all 3 mounting bolts. And yeah, this thing's really sturdy. You know, it's essentially an extension of this 1.5-inch steel tabletop now. So I'm gonna build those ears, and then these are gonna give us the adjustability to kind of choose which differential we're gonna work on, whether it be the 8-inch or the 9.5. So we can just set it in there and just work on it from the top down instead of on its side like that. Tightening the ears down, we're gonna see if we can just drop this diff right on. I guess this is the moment of truth. These things are exactly 8.5 inches apart, which is the mounting surface for these bolts. So, moment of truth. I think it fits. Hey!
So surprisingly, the diff holder worked out great, which I guess it should since I took all the measurements and I kind of planned it and built it that way, but I'm not a great fabricator, and oftentimes things move when you weld them, and I'm just not great with metal. I'm learning, and so it's nice to have a project that actually went well. So the ears are adjustable to fit different sizes, which wasn't planned, but it ended up working out that way. And now I have the diff mounted. I'm checking backlash and run out before tearing it apart. I just want a general idea of the condition before I start ripping into it.
So I was just checking the ring gear backlash and the run out, and what I noticed, besides the backlash being totally out of whack, the run out's pretty good, but I noticed something with this. I don't know if you saw it when I was trying to turn the pinion. Look how hard it is to turn this thing. This is not normal. This is taking a lot of force, and it's squeaking. You can hear it as it's squeaking. You guys hear that? That's totally not normal. And this Land Cruiser has had a persistent squeak in the front end. Like it kind of goes and goes up with the speed of the engine. So I knew it was something with the running gear. I just didn't think it was going to be the front differential. So I think the pinion bearing in this thing is toasted. And basically we can stop all of our, pre-teardown checks right here and just start tearing it apart, because I want to see the destruction that's sitting in this area right here. Just a disclaimer, this is not the proper way to pop this out, but this is toast anyway, so it's how we're doing it. They make a special service tool to get this done. But since this is already toast, it doesn't really matter, does it? So pop it right out and here we go. Well, it is 1:20 in the morning. We got the front diff totally disassembled at this point. All that's left in here are a couple races, but here's the pinion and the bearings that are making the noise. We got the ring gear and the carrier right there. I don't know what bearing is the bad one, the one that's making the noise with this. I think it's this one. What is this? The pinion output bearing? This one has a little bit more play and makes a little bit more noise than this one does. So I think this might be the one, or maybe both of them, that's causing our issue with why that thing was so hard to turn and why it was squeaking and stuff. But either way, I mean, everything you see here is going to get replaced with the new gears anyway. So we have everything all set up here, everything organized, left hand, right hand. These are also marked with the engraver, but the paint pins just, what's the word? Redundancy. And then we have things set up for left hand and right hand. Doesn't really matter how you organize it, just make sure that it is organized, and then that's all that really matters. So we'll pick it up tomorrow and get started on the rear diff. Well, I had to go to the parts store and pick up some Purple Power, some more towels, some penetrant, and some brake cleaner, because this is a really dirty job. So this is going to help make it a little bit cleaner. I got quite a late start today, but the plan is to take that third member that we were working on last night, the front third right here, and toss it in this bucket with a diluted Purple Power mix just to get this thing a little bit cleaner. But I want to pop out these races and everything else that's left in the housing first, toss it in there, and then we can get started on the 9.5-inch rear. Now, I think that the little ears that I made that hold this pinion or this ring gear, this third member housing, to the mount, should work for the rear one too, because the rear third member is a 9.5-inch, the front is a reverse 8, so obviously these little holes are going to be in different areas. But I think that I can loosen this mounting hole, turn this thing out to widen that gap, and probably fit the rear 9.5. So let's see if it works. I'm going to go ahead and pop out these races on the ground, because if I start hammering this with it suspended on the stand, it's gonna kind of be all over the place, so it's gonna be easier to get it on the ground. I think the only thing that's left in here are the 2 races for the pinion bearings, and I think these reverse 8s have like an oil retainer in there as well, and that's under the smaller pinion bearing right here. So just gonna toss it on this wood block. Come on out of there. Toss on this wood block and then hammer these things out. Definitely coming out. I can feel it giving when I hit it, so it should come out the next couple hits. There it goes. All right, so we got that race. Flip this thing over. Yeah, that's the big race right there. Now this one, we got to get this out without damaging that oil ring, and I think we're just gonna hammer it and get it out of there. The setup kit, I would assume, comes with a new one, so if it doesn't, I guess we'll order one if we end up messing this thing up. So the manual shows knocking this out from the back of the oil ring with the brass punch. The other way to do this would be to get a special service tool, which I don't have, but I did Google it, and it looks like the gear setup kits don't come with this ring, but you can order it new, so something I'd want to replace anyway, so we're just gonna knock it out and ruin it. Not too worried about it. All right, there we go. Flip this thing over. Oh, or just do that, move it out of the way. Here is the bearing, and there's that oil ring. So this sits kind of like that on the back of it, and they get driven in together during assembly, but driving them out, not sure how you wouldn't ruin this ring. Also, like I said, not too worried about it. Purple Power says to use this thing at full strength for engines. You gotta be careful of Purple Power, especially if it's aluminum. It can eat away the aluminum. Of course, our 3rd member housing is not, but I still don't wanna mix this at full strength. I'm probably only gonna mix this a little bit. So I have probably 3.5 gallons in this jug. Just eyeball it, I guess, see what we wanna do. Get it all over the floor, of course. I think that's good for now. We're gonna just put it right there. Ghost Shield coming in clutch once again. Floor right here is just bubbling up, not absorbing at all. Nice. Drop this thing in and we will check it tomorrow, see how it's doing. Maybe check it in a few hours first to see if it's doing anything weird to the metal, but should be good. Just hit this thing in here. If we have to adjust the concentrate at all, then we'll do that in the future. But for now, let's move on to the front diff, or the rear diff actually. All right, 9 7/8 on center for those bolt holes is kind of what I got from looking at the differential housing about where these holes are spaced in this differential for the mounting. So this is either gonna be a disaster and the whole table is gonna flip this way from the weight of this one. That's why I put the other carrier back there, or this is just gonna drop right into place. This thing has to be like 80 pounds or something. It's pretty heavy. Let's see here. It's not like 80 pounds is that much weight, but it's awkward when you're holding it in this way. Okay, that fit. This ear needs to get adjusted in on this side. Let's see if we can get this without smashing my fingers. Where are we at? We're close. There we go. Can't believe it. I can't believe this thing works as well as it does because I made it, and things that I make typically don't tend to work this well. Awesome. So on the rear diff, you can hear when I spin the pinion, we don't get that same screeching and we don't get the same drag that we had, you know, basically on the border of seizing that we had with the front diff. And this is definitely well worn in, it's pretty loose, but at least with the rear diff, we're starting at a much better point than the front diff. And again, this really doesn't matter because we're gonna swap everything out anyway, the bearings that are here, the ring gear, the pinion, and the carrier basically for all new stuff. So it doesn't really matter, but it's nice to know this is already in good condition starting off. So we're gonna take just some measurements just to cross-reference it, just to have it on hand for when we install the new stuff, and then get this thing torn apart.
We're doing the same thing here on the rear diff as we did on the front diff. We're just gonna take some measurements before I start tearing it apart. And then once we do start tearing it apart, gonna make sure everything is labeled, engraved, marked with the paint pen, hit with a punch, doesn't matter. However it can be organized, it needs to be organized and labeled and set for each side. So what's on the right side has to go to the right side, what's on the left side has to go to the left side. Then we're gonna go ahead and organize all of our nuts and bolts and everything on the table as well, just like we did with the rear diff. Now, I don't know if you guys have noticed, if you watch the channel for a while, I usually put a lot of music in my videos, and in this one, I'm kind of just talking over things and just allowing the content to play instead of having music. And I'd like to get your guys' opinion on if you like this format more, or if you like having a little bit more background music or anything. I'm just kind of playing around with how I'm making my videos and just wanted to get your guys' input. So let me know in the comments below.
Same thing as last time, we're just gonna pound out these races and then we'll be done with the disassembly of both of the diffs. This one's already moving pretty easy. I can feel it. Probably the next couple hits is gonna fall right out. Well, there we go. All right, flip this thing over, get the other race. This one does not have that oil ring the other one had, so it's gonna be a little bit easier. If you guys are wondering why I'm like hesitant and I've been wearing gloves the whole time, it's because I absolutely hate gear oil. I hate the smell of it. I hate the feel of it. You know, people have like some like sensory things sometimes. I just absolutely cannot stand gear oil. Maybe everybody hates it. Let me know. There we go. Well, it's another late night in the garage. I think it's like 9 or 10 p.m. right now, but we did get the differentials totally torn apart. So as you can see here, we have the 8-inch and the 9.5-inch ring gears torn out of those third members and the carriers as well. So I'm just gonna leave this one here, let it drain all of its gear oil out. I did leave a thin coat of oil on both of the areas where those races and the bearings ride, on the caps as well, just so that they don't rust or anything like that. So everything is clean, but it has a nice coating on it of some sort of lubricant. So look at the difference between the 9.5-inch and the 8-inch Toyota gear. So this is the one that's in all your first gen 4Runners, second gen 4Runners, pickups, and in the IFS it's actually even smaller. In the front it's a 7.5-inch clamshell. So that is quite the size difference. It should be a lot stronger than the front, but to be honest, I've never had an issue with the Toyota ring gear exploding because I don't wheel with my foot on the skinny pedal. I take things at a more like practical approach, and I don't just mash the pedal, or else I probably would have blown one of those up by now. Anyway, really tired of getting dirty. I think next I'm gonna work on the KTM because it's a little bit cleaner of a job, and then after I finish that up, we'll get to the knuckles and tear apart the rest of this axle.
Recently on the KTM, I've changed the spark plug, the rear tire, readjusted the forks and got them realigned. I've changed out the case oil, emptied the gas, put new gas in it, just a bunch of other stuff that I can't remember. But what I want to do now is flush the coolant and get this engine ice in here, and then we should be good for a long time, probably till next season or even longer to replace the coolant. And then we're going to move on to the exhaust.
Well, we're gonna get started on the exhaust on the KTM. As you can see here, we're running a stock pipe, and I think it's cut down because if you see right there, we have a Phillips head screw. And I do not think KTM would have shipped that way. This would probably have been riveted in or some other thing would be there. And you can kind of see right there, it looks like there might be like cut marks. So maybe they shortened that thing down to make it louder. I don't know. But either way, these can't be ridden on a lot of trails, or they shouldn't be because they don't have a spark arrestor. So I found this this FMF exhaust on Facebook Marketplace, listed for 80 bucks. This is a turbine core too. It's the exact part number for that KTM. And yeah, it has a little bit of a bent bracket there, and that's about it. But I have it apart because we're gonna repack it. When I got to the guy's house, he goes, you can have it for $65. And I didn't even try to bargain with the guy. He just gave me a $15 discount when I showed up. So we took it, of course. We're gonna get that installed on the bike and see how it sounds.
What I want to do here is tear apart the silencer, get all the internal pieces out, and clean them up. Since this is a two-stroke, it uses premix, and that means we're going to run into some sludge or residue inside the silencer, inside the exhaust, that we're going to have to clean out. So I want to take the center core area here, get it all cleaned up so we could actually see through it, and then work on repacking the exhaust. I tried to fit the entire roll of the packing material around this center core area, and it ended up being way too much. So I did have to take out quite a bit of that packing material, but I was still able to get it just tight enough where it made a tight seal to the silencer, and I still had to kind of force it in there, which means it's going to compact over time, and there's not too much and there's not too little. And we just took some exhaust gasket sealer, put it around the flange, toss it all back together, and now we're ready to install it on the bike.
Well, the exhaust is finally done, and I hate to admit that took way more time off camera than it looked in the video, but it fits on the bike, and that's what I was mainly concerned about, was if this even fits. Because I noticed that, you see these front washers here, I'm missing one of the rear ones, and I thought when I bought this, I knew it was missing it, but I thought that maybe my stock exhaust would have usable washers. But as you can see, this is an insert that goes through the bracket, and it doesn't split down the middle. So I think if I were to take this aluminum bushing out and kind of slice it down the middle, I think it would be the exact same thing as this bushing right here. They look very, very similar. If not, we'll just run a normal washer right now and then get one of these in the future. But let's try that and see if it works, and if it does, then we'll be done with the exhaust install. Well, unfortunately, this is not going to work, and we're going to have to resort to using washers for now. I don't know if you can tell on camera, but the machined area on the face of the spacer here is the inside bore here. So it's not the size of the bolt hole, it's the size of this machined area. So I'd have to turn that down. I don't have the equipment or the machinery to do it right now. Maybe in the future when the shop's going, but for right now, we're going to be using washers, and we'll just find one of those spacers to toss it in later. All right, let's see how she sounds. All right, so we got the exhaust fitted. As you can see with the stock mount, see how it's offset? This front mounting location is offset from the rear. Well, I cut it off, but it's a little closer to the subframe. On the FMF pipe, they're kind of in line with each other, so I'm not really sure. Maybe it's the wrong model. It says it fits a 2018 XC. This is an XCW, so maybe there's a slight difference, but I was able to get it to fit. It sounds pretty good. It's actually maybe just as loud, a little bit louder. You guys can judge from the before and after, but next thing I want to do is check out what spring is in, what power valve spring I have. So these things have a green spring, a yellow spring, and a red spring, and these change the preload of the power valve. So I don't know what's in there. I just want to replace it with a factory yellow one, and then yeah, we'll be good to go. This thing is spring loaded, so we want to keep some tension on it as we undo it. And I have the bike leaning over to its side. If these things are overfilled at all, like even by a little bit, this is kind of level with case oil. So if you have just the right amount in there, it won't spill, but if you have anything over, you know, just the right amount, you might spill. So that's why we have this thing on its side. Let's see what spring we got in here. Oh, it does have a yellow spring. You can see it. All right, so it looks like it does have the yellow spring. So as you can see here, we have the main spring, and then we have this auxiliary spring, and you can tell it has a little bit of a yellow paint on it. So I thought that I checked this before and I couldn't tell the paint color, but it's definitely a yellow spring. I think I'm gonna replace it with the same one, just put a new yellow spring in there, and then yeah, we'll be ready to ride. Kind of redundant to just replace it with the exact same spring, but you know, replacing old for new never can hurt. And I don't want the green spring. I think it's going to be too mellow. I think I'll kill myself with the red spring, so we're going to go with the standard yellow right here. And there we go. All right, guys, well, that's gonna wrap it up for this one. The diffs are torn apart for the Land Cruiser and ready to go for the install. The dirt bike is ready to go as well for any future trail riding or trips that I go on. I was gonna tear apart the knuckles in this video for the Land Cruiser, but I decided that I'm just gonna do it when I get the knuckle rebuild kit, and then we'll just take care of it all then. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Later.